Thanks, Robert. Good afternoon. Today's presentation is on the A4 Enniskillen Southern Bypass, which is a scheme under development by the Department for Infrastructure. Today's short presentation will focus on how the scheme has evolved from conception through to the current preliminary design proposals. We'll provide a high-level overview of the engineering assessment, the traffic and economic impacts, as well as the extensive work in assessing the impact that the scheme is anticipated to have on the environment. So in terms of the background, the A4 forms part of the southwestern key transport corridor linking Belfast with the Fermanagh Lakelands and beyond to Sligo. At present, Enniskillen town centre can act as a bottleneck when local traffic mixes with strategic traffic, causing delays for both. The proposed bypass will provide a new transport link to the southern side of the town, improving the connection between the A4 Dublin Road and the A4 Sligo Road, and will offer benefits such as reduced traffic congestion in Enniskillen, a transport link along the A4 from the Dublin Road to the Sligo Road, more efficient movement of traffic in and around Enniskillen, while reducing the air and noise pollution within the town centre. The scheme aims to encourage a shift in transport modes by providing better infrastructure that promotes walking and cycling within Enniskillen. Having the opportunity to reduce vehicular traffic within the town centre will help realise the true benefits of projects such as the Enniskillen Public Realm Scheme, which is an environmental improvement scheme providing high quality paving, curbing, planting, landscaping design, new street furniture and lighting, creating areas for public artwork and structures. The A4 Enniskillen Bypass is contained within the Regional Strategic Transport Network Transport Plan. The scheme is also included in DFI's investment delivery plan for roads. The findings of the Stage 1 Constraints and Corridors study were reported in the A4 Enniskillen Southern Bypass Stage 1 Scheme Assessment Report in 2010. 4 corridor options were developed and assessed based on the potential advantages and disadvantages associated with providing an alignment within that corridor. At Stage 1, it was concluded that a corridor between the A4 Sligo Road and the A4 Dublin Road be considered for further assessment. Environmentally, this decision was based on the proximity to residential properties, likely flooding impacts, and impacts to the cultural heritage features. At Stage 2, consideration was also given to the preferred carriageway type and preferred form of junction and their locations for connecting the proposed road into the existing road network. Environmentally, the impacts of the route options were very similar, and key considerations were engineering and economic. While both the blue and yellow options offer similar earthwork balances, the blue option requires significantly less volumes of cut and fill material. As the earthworks footprint of the blue option is smaller than that for the yellow option, it requires less land from local farms, businesses, and residential properties. As the cost of constructing the blue option was estimated to be less than the yellow option, it was assessed to offer a slightly better return on investment and therefore was selected as the preferred route. With the preferred route being identified, additional site data was required to develop the preliminary design proposals. The traffic model used in the Stage 2 scheme assessment was refined by using data collected from roadside interviews and journey time surveys undertaken in September 2016. These interviews collected data such as the origin and destination of those entering Enniskillen, as well as the primary purpose of the journey. This information was combined with mobile phone data and used to develop the origin destination matrices within the traffic model. An extensive ground investigation was also undertaken between November 2016 and February 2017. We also engaged with all utility providers with apparatus within the study area to ensure the impacts on the scheme proposals were fully understood and that suitable diversionary works were considered. Michael will discuss the archaeological and the ecology surveys later in the presentation. In terms of highways, then the preferred route consists of a 2.1 kilometres of new carriageway, 2 new roundabouts and a Ghost Island junction. The cross section is a wide single 2+1 carriageway, which consists of 2 lanes of travel in one direction and a single lane in the opposite direction. The new link includes the provision of a conflicting changeover at the midpoint of the alignment, providing overtaking opportunities in both directions. This means there's 660 metres of road for eastbound traffic and 840 metres of road for westbound traffic for overtaking. The Ghost Island Junction is located at the centre of the conflicting changeover and provides access to private lands. The new link provides a combined footway cycleway along the northern boundary of the road, with designated crossing points at all junctions, consisting of drop curbs and tactile paving. The road affects 3 active farms and businesses between the River Erne and the River Sillies. The scheme proposals therefore include 3 underpasses with associated access tracks as mitigation of the land severance. The road will operate under the national speed limit, with sections of restricted speeds within the vicinity of the 2 new roundabout junctions. A positive drainage system will be provided, with all surface runoff from the new link road being treated within 5 new detention basins located across the scheme. Pre-earthworks drainage will also be provided to intercept runoff from adjacent land to prevent it from reaching the road infrastructure. As mentioned on the previous slide, a new footway cycleway will be provided along the northern boundary of the scheme. Following consultation with Sustrans and DFI cycling officer, there was a desire to improve the current infrastructure for cyclists. It was agreed to extend the footway cycleway from the new bypass to tie in with the current infrastructure on the Dublin Road and the Derrylin Road. This meant amending the horizontal alignment of the Derrylin Road, shifting it laterally to provide a new footway cycleway on its eastern boundary. The new footway cycleway links in with the current infrastructure at the A4 Sligo Road, A509 Derrylin Road roundabout, commonly known as Riley's Cross. The preliminary design proposals were presented to the public at an exhibition held in April 2018. Representatives from Jones Memorial Primary School highlighted the difficulties teachers and children have crossing the Derrylin Road safely due to increased vehicle speeds, a high percentage of HGVs, and a lack of crossing infrastructure. Following this event, DFI have worked with the local traffic section office, and the scheme proposals have been amended to include traffic calming measures on the Derrylin Road, as well as providing a new signal control crossing. A series of Arcady assessments were undertaken to determine the size of the 2 new roundabouts. The Arcady assessment determined the number of traffic lanes required on each approach, as well as defining the geometric parameters required to provide sufficient capacity for the anticipated traffic volumes. The 2 new roundabouts have an inscribed circle diameter of 45 metres, with 2 lanes on each approach of all arms of the junction. The only exception to this is the bypass arm of the Derrylin Road roundabout, in which a single lane approach was deemed sufficient. Uncontrolled crossing facilities are provided on the new bypass, as well as the A4 Dublin Road. Both junctions are to be lit, and the lighting provision will be extended to tie in with the current lighting infrastructure on the Derrylin Road and Dublin Road. The image on the top right of the screen demonstrates the number of constraints within the vicinity of the new roundabout on the A4. Providing a new junction resulted in relocating the secondary access into the Killyhaven Hotel, providing acoustic fencing to mitigate the anticipated increase in noise levels, while providing enhanced landscaping proposals to mitigate the visual impact of the new River Erne Bridge. There are 7 new structures required along the length of the proposed bypass to facilitate the continued operation and use of the existing roads, existing access tracks, and water courses affected by the proposed road. This includes 2 new bridges across the River Erne and the River Sillies, 3 underpasses which will be single-span reinforced concrete box structures, and 2 reinforced concrete cantilever retaining walls at the new Dublin Road roundabout. The River Erne structure has a total length of approximately 81 metres. The River Erne is a navigable channel, and we work closely with Waterways Ireland to ensure there was sufficient headroom for boats to manoeuvre through the structure in a 1 in 100 year flood event. The three-span arrangement has approximate spans between support centerlines of 22 metres, 35 metres and 22 metres. The total width of the proposed substructure is 21.5 metres. The deck will be formed from a reinforced concrete deck slab supported on weathering steel plate girders. Inspection galleries are provided each end of the structure to facilitate bearing and expansion joint inspections and maintenance. The abutments will be cast in situ reinforced concrete walls, most likely founded on piled foundations due to a combination of high loading and low strength soils close to the river and banks. Pedestrian access to the front of each abutment will be provided to facilitate maintenance and provide safe passage for mammals to cross under the proposed road above the flood level. Intermediate supports could consist of either reinforced concrete leaf piers or discrete reinforced concrete circular columns. Intermediate supports are likely to be founded on pad foundations cast directly onto the rock surface close to the bed level. For the River Sillies Bridge, to provide a clear span across the river and the associated 1 in 100 year floodplain, a skew span of approximately 31.5 metres between bearings is required with a skew angle of 45 degrees. The total width of the proposed structure is 21.5 metres. The deck will be formed from a reinforced concrete deck slab supported on weathering steel plate girders braced in pairs. Due to the high skew of the deck, inspection galleries are required at each end of the structure to facilitate bearing and an expansion joint inspection and maintenance. The abutments will be cast in situ reinforced concrete walls, most likely founded on piled foundations due to the soft nature of the soils in the region of the River Sillies. In developing the preliminary design proposals, we consulted with all utility providers of apparatus that would be impacted upon by the scheme. There are 33 kV overhead electricity lines and a series of pylons that traverse the site, which is shown as the blue circles in the image attached. The overhead lines diagonally cross the River Erne at the location of the new bridge. We work closely with NIE to assess all available options to mitigate the impact that the scheme proposals would have. One option was to have an increased tension in the overhead cables, reducing the extent of the sag in the cable under high voltage. And while this would have provided sufficient clearance from the bridge post-construction, it would mitigate the significant health and safety risk of trying to construct a bridge with restricted headroom under live electricity cables. It was therefore decided to divert the electricity cables underground, which means 2 new terminal towers are to be constructed to the west of the River Erne and within Castlecool Estate. This option removes the health and safety risk associated with the overhead lines in constructing the bridge, while also provides environmental benefits as 2 electricity pylons will be removed. The undulating topography of the existing ground along the proposed route means that significant earthworks are required. Most of the bypass will be constructed either in cutting or on embankment. The maximum proposed embankment height is approximately 7.5 metres from existing ground level, and the maximum cutting depth will be approximately 11 metres from existing ground level. The cuttings are expected to encounter mainly glacial till material. However, there is likely to be alluvium, river terrace deposits and made ground present along the alignment. It may also be possible to reuse some of the glacial till to construct the proposed embankments. The bypass will be constructed on a series of embankments and cuttings, which will typically have a 1 in 2 and 1 in 3 slopes, respectively. Due to localized poor ground conditions, the embankment at the west of the bypass, between approximate changes 0 and 200, will require a piled foundation with geogrid load transfer platform or similar ground treatment. Additionally, the embankment between change 970 and 1120 will require additional works to address the significant thickness of alluvium present. Engineering proposals include soil mix columns or driven pile foundations to the embankment. Either solution will require a geogrid load transfer platform. It is possible that the embankments between Cheney's Knot and 200 and 970 and 1120 may benefit from soil reinforcement to reduce their footprints and therefore the area requiring treatment. The traffic assessment undertaken at stage 3 has shown that the bypass will attract vehicles from the town centre, reducing the overall congestion at peak periods. The proposed scheme is anticipated to provide a significant reduction in journey times for vehicle users travelling into the town centre. Secondary routes within the surrounding areas also benefit from reduced journey times once the bypass becomes operational. The bypass is anticipated to reduce traffic volumes along Wellington Road and Henry Street by approximately 4,000 vehicles per day. The construction of the scheme is estimated to be 20 million. The economic assessment undertaken at stage 3 shows that the scheme offers high value for money, with a benefit to cost ratio of 2.53, and is forecast to generate significant levels of user benefits, with present value benefits of 49.3 million over a 60-year period. At the time of the public exhibition undertaken in April 2018, we had prepared a fly-through video, which I'll just run through now. So the video starts off, it'll show the scheme proposals, and starts off in the A509 Derrylin Road. So from this point onwards, the current section of road is to be widened to 6.9 meters, with the road being laterally shifted to provide a footway cycleway. Just showing the new Derrylin Road roundabout and its proximity to the River Sillies. Western underpass, so this is the first of 3 underpasses that you can see. Again, the video highlighting the overtaking provision from each of the roundabouts. The drainage treatment ponds, that's 1 of 5 ponds just located across the site. The video also shows the pylons that the route meanders its way through. And we're just coming up to the centre of the scheme now, so with the Ghost Island Junction and the private access. Again, where you've seen that drainage treatment pond, that's all the new landscaping proposals that embeds with the existing landscaping that's already on the site. The access track is part of the old railway line, and then just showing the proximity of the new combined footway cycleway. At this point, we're just coming up to the new, coming over the River Arm Bridge and the new Dublin Road roundabout. Again, it shows the constraints that we have with the Killyhaven Industrial Estate and the residential properties next to the new roundabout. The footway cycleway will tie into the existing infrastructure on the Dublin Road. It shows the foundations of the old railway line, which will be kept. And this gives an image then of what the new bridge would look like. The video now goes through takes you through the scheme from a driver's eye point of view. On the left-hand side, you can just see the start of the acoustic fencing. So again, you can see the footway cycleway on the northern boundary of the road. On the southern boundary, it's planned to be kept as grass verge. You've got road restraint systems provided. just to provide protection for vehicle users where we have structures. The proposals, what this video doesn't show is that the area to the left, which actually shows quite open, there's going to be enhanced landscaping put in. That's one of the changes that was made following the exhibition. You're just coming over the central underpass. Again, this is the acoustic barrier just in around the Riverside Marina. And then this is the approach as you come over the River Sillies Bridge onto the A509 Derrylin Road roundabout. That's a video. There is a link has been provided to DFI's website where you can find the copy of the background information to the scheme, and you can also get a copy of the video if you want to have another look at it. So I'll now pass over to Michael, who'll provide a summary of the environmental impact assessment for the scheme.
Thanks very much, Andrew. There, I was just remembering back there, Andrew, to the public consultation that we held there, that video was vital there in explaining the scheme to people just so well. So yeah,
it was very useful in terms of, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the plans, and obviously with the environmental impact assessment report, there's a lot of information. It's a bulky document, whereas the video just gives a good summary of it all.
Able to explain it. Absolutely. Thanks very much. So Andrew said I'm Michael McLaren there. I've got about 25 years experience now, and I was the lead environmental coordinator on the team, and still providing environmental input into the scheme there, along with a good team of people, including Louise Gallagher there that's on the panel. So I was responsible for all the environmental assessments, getting them all done, the production of any of the associated documents for the scheme, including the EIA report and habitats regulations assessment. So just a bit of background then about the assessment and why we're doing it. An EIA and HRA, that this falls under legislation, and whenever we started this in March 2016, so it began with under the roads EIA regs 2007. But sorry, Andrew, I think your screen has changed there. Can you put it back to the presentation? He threatened he was going to do this here to try and put me off during the presentation there. So
apologies for that.
Thanks. Oh, you won. Yeah, we started back in March 2016 with scoping in various bits and pieces with regard to the EIA, but in May 2017 the EIAs were updated and included a number of additional things that needed to be considered. Now, because we had started scoping of the EIA in 2016, we didn't, going by the legislation, we didn't necessarily have to move to the updated regs, but DFI made the decision to, and it was probably a good decision. So we were included assessments like to do with climate and vulnerability and things like that there that came under the new regs, and human health, which needed to be considered. So yeah, in May 2017, after that there, we updated, and I'll explain a bit more about that a bit later on. We also conducted a habitats regulations assessment, or HRA. Initially went through stage 1 screening of the HRA process, which has got 4 main stages. Likely significant effects were identified on a number of features, including the otter populations and the wintering whipper swan populations of Upper Lough Erne, the SPA and Ramsar site. So a decision was taken to, because there was likely significant effects, we then had to move on to stage 2 appropriate assessment, which demonstrated that there was no effect on the integrity of the international sites and no mitigation was required then. And we've been carrying out subsequent surveys and stuff to make sure that this is still valid. If you can go to the next one there, Andrew. So in terms of surveys for the scheme environmental surveys, there was I had never seen so many surveys being undertaken in schemes before, and I think it's just a reflection of where the EIA process has got to. Ecological surveys, there was aquatic and terrestrial surveys. I'll go through them. I think it's in the next slide there. Archaeological, we initially started off with walkovers and then geophysical surveys. There was noise surveys, on-site noise surveys. We also had diffusion tube surveys for air quality, landscape and visual. There was a number of surveys, photo montages produced and things like that. Contaminated land, again, there was preliminary risk assessments, and then there was we had geotechnical investigations and sort of piggybacked on that to get some environmental samples and various analysis done for that. Agricultural surveys were also carried out there. The land's obviously agricultural in nature, so we went and liaised with the landowners and the people that were working the land here to understand exactly what was going on at the various farms and the potential impacts, things like that. We carried out surveys, and that was then the information was brought back to the design team and used for things like accommodation works. And as I said there was ground investigations where we undertook then sort of targeted environmental sampling as well. If you want to move to the next one there, Andrew. Yeah, this is just a selection of the ecological surveys that took place now, and some of these have been repeated. So there, we began with the phase 1 habitat surveys, and then we went into specialist protected species surveys and other surveys there. So you can see then the badger surveys, otters, initially a preliminary bad roost assessment, but that then turned into emergence and re-entry surveys, which at the time NIEA guidelines had just been updated, and the requirements were quite extensive for the bat surveys. We also then done the breeding bird surveys, vertebrate surveys, river corridor surveys, and we had fisheries surveys. We'd actually aquatic type surveys done, and this was also carried out at stage 1 and stage 2. So we built upon the information that was generated by ACOM in the first 2 stages. We undertook our work at stage 3 DMRB. So if you want to go to the next one there. So in terms of environmental assessments and reviews that took place, we had our original environmental scoping. So that was, and we started preparing or carrying out the EIA under the previous regulations, but with the new regulations that came in 2017, the decision was taken by DFI to move to these. So we had to then incorporate climate, population, human health, major accidents, disasters into the assessment. So we went back and updated the scoping and went back and consulted with all consultees. It was a bit of a strange period back then, because all the guidance wasn't produced then, so we had to go and look at various places then in Highways England and all our sources then for updated guidance. So we prepared the environmental impact assessment report, which the terminology got changed with the regulations as well, from environmental statement to EIAR with those regulations. So we then prepared this report, and once we had the full draft completed, we provided this to Shared Environmental Services, SES, who are located at Mid-Antrim Council in Ballymena, and they were acting as a reviewer for DFI, who I believe brought them in on subsequent schemes to act as a review. And SES conducted a fantastic review, basically looking at the procedural legislation and all the stages that we should have went through and checking against this, and came back to us with various comments. So it was a bit of an iterative process then. So we had a number of meetings and communications with SES. So that was very, very beneficial. So that led up to the publication of the EIA consultation draft orders, whatever else, and subsequent to that there then, to make sure that the findings have, obviously there's been a time lag, are still valid then. There's been a number of verification surveys and some work done regarding that. So if you want to move on. The main sort of environmental design considerations that we worked closely with the design team were to do with the obviously the river, the Erne there. So the bridge is obviously a huge structure going across there, so it was to minimize the pier footprint, and also to get the boat clearance right. Another main design consideration. So there was a lot of consultation with Waterways Ireland, etc., to do with that. On the Scillies, the River Scillies as well, the tributary, there's also a turning head there. You can only get so far up the Scillies. So we had to take that into account. So that has been incorporated into the design. And the promotion of sustainable travel was a huge design consideration for the team. So we non-motorized users, vehicles, walkers, stuff, that the provision was there. We had a number of meetings with Sustrans and the DFI's own cycling unit to try and increase connectivity and make sure that the NMUs were well considered and incorporated into the design. So if you want to move to the next one there, Andrew. This slide just shows some of the thing. Andrew's already got it in the presentation and showed it there. So it gives you an idea then of the cycleway that we have there in the red line there. The purple line is showing national cycle route there, so you can sort of see where it's connecting in there. So that's got that's in the north side of the carriageway then, the red boundary then, and it moves into the west as you go to the Derrylin Road. If you want to move on there, Andrew. Archaeological investigations. This was quite interesting here, and it was quite unique, and it demonstrated to me just that you have to use opportunities, and every scheme project is different. On this scheme, we had 7 main landowners, so it was a manageable amount of landowners to go and liaise with, and unusually, we were able to get archaeological investigations carried out prior to any land vesting, with the agreement of landowners through no small effort of the DFI, who maintain fantastic relationships with landowners throughout great example of how to do something, keep people up to date with information, be very transparent with information, which really helped. So we get permission to do the archaeological investigations, which were extensive. So we agreed on the back of the geophysical surveys and the initial assessment, we agreed archaeological investigations with Historic Environment Division. And this was became a mixture of linear test trenches, which you can see to the top right. Some areas where there was perceived high potential were completely stripped. There was also underwater dive surveys in the Erne and auger surveys along the banks of the Erne. Findings were actually weren't as much as we thought. That there was only findings in one strip area where there was the remains of a house structure from the late Bronze Age. Any of the findings then were extracted and artifacts, were taken out by the archaeologists, but it was very few things there. So if you want to move on there, Andrew. Yeah, the EIA and draft orders then were published in March 2018, I think just after the public consultation event there. So we used Waterways Ireland offices in Enniskillen and had this event, and we had the EIA and stuff, and people come into it, and all the concerns, any concerns were noted and actioned after this. So there has been some updates to the design then that will be brought forward into the next stage. So a register is maintained of that there. So I think that was about it. The other thing, was just there's been subsequent verification surveys, as mentioned earlier there, just to make sure that the findings are still valid before we brief the ministers on the scheme. But that's all from me.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrew and Michael. It was a brilliant presentation, loads of detail in there, and a good mix of engineering and environmental management aspects. So it's really perfect for this joint event. So we'll move quickly on to the Q&A. Jared's going to come in and help. We'll take turns going through the questions. I see a few questions already, but maybe to give people more time to add some more questions, I'll kick it off with a bit of a topical question of my own. Maybe one for you, Michael. Could you tell us a bit more about the impacts of climate on the scheme?
I actually thought that this might have been asked there. It's very topical there, Robert. Because we went back, and this is why I think it was a great sort of intervention by DFI by going back and making the decision back then to follow the 2017 regs, because climate was brought in the regs into the EIA regs then. So we had to subsequently go back and scope and with regard to climate, population, human health, and a couple of other bits there. So an assessment was carried out on, climate assessments carried out effects on climate and the vulnerability of your scheme to climate. So we had to consider that. The impact on climate, it obviously will have an impact. Any sort of major scheme like this will have an impact on climate and carbon emissions, unfortunately, with the construction there. So there will be an overall improvement through time in CO2 emissions. Obviously, the emissions that will be used, or the CO2 generated during the construction, will take quite a while to get back, but we will be able to get it back. So I think the payback time was about 27 or 28 years, 28 years to 29 years for that there will be an overall improvement in that. And we will start, with taking away the congestion from the town centre, the new modes of transport, and things like that. That hopefully now during the next design phases, we can design out more with the more information that becomes available to the contractor and to the design teams, that we'll be able to minimize where at all possible. And with the introduction of the other government initiatives, we think we can even improve from the figures that we've generated in the EIA.
All right, thanks very much.
Very good, Michael. I have a related question, I suppose. It was, well, for probably Michael and Andrew, there was reference made in the talk to the 1 in year 100 flood levels and the clearance for the bridges. But just given the increasingly variable and extreme weather we've had in recent years, and even some very major flooding on the Erne in the last 6-7 years, how is the predictability of future flood levels being affected?
Andrew, do you want to pick in that one there from the?
Yeah, so as part of the stage 3 scheme assessment report, we had taken flood models from that have been developed with Rivers Agency, and we've done a flood risk assessment on it. What that had shown was that because the River Erne is a navigable channel, we had to ensure that there was sufficient clearance underneath the structures. So the actual design, because it's probably one of the main reasons why it's a 3-span structure. What we had to do was there was constraints beneath the bridge deck, and that we had to keep it a navigable channel above the 1 in 100 year flood event. So once we determined that level, we then had to ensure there was sufficient clearance. And then above it, we had the overhead cables that we have mentioned, the 33 kV cables. So with constraints top and bottom, we had to keep the bridge deck slender as possible, and that's why the proposals have considered a 3-span structure. And I suppose the impacts of that is we've got piers in the River Erne, and the impacts, the potential environmental impacts that could have. What we're considering now as part of the next phase is the potential to a single span option, but again, that will be subject to revisiting the flood risk assessment and those flood levels that we're having to follow. So that work is continually being reviewed and updated as part of the design.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
We've got another question here. Does use of a shared cycle and footway for a new road corridor represent best practice? Was consideration given to separating the cycle infrastructure?
Yeah, so at the time, it was because we're anticipating quite a low volume of cyclists along this route. The 2.5 meter shared footway cycleway is considered appropriate in accordance with guidance. However, since then, we're looking to enhance the active travel measures. And one of the options that is being considered is to have a section of this footway cycleway remote from the road. So we're looking at maximizing the separation distance that we can within the land vested. And that'll see approximately about 1 kilometre of the footway cycleway route being more off route than what's currently shown in the proposals. The other side of that is that DFI have just commissioned a study to look at enhancing cycling measures within Enniskillen town centre as well. So that's continually being looked at. So these proposals that were shown sort of back in 2018 are evolving to enhance the active travel measures that are already being shown on the scheme. So it's something that Minister Mallon's very keen, very proactive to see happen. So we're revisiting those proposals.
Okay. What consideration was given to fendering systems along the navigational channel around the main 3-span bridge?
In terms of
Protecting the structure from
protection
vessels
around the piers. Yeah. So that was all modelled, but the impacts from memory were quite minimal in around how it would affect and around the piers. So it was considered as part of that flood risk assessment work that was undertaken.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just a question about your video there. Was the video modeling using InfraWorks?
Is it Studio Max? I think was the software, 3D Studio Max, I think was the software that our in-house design team had used. So all the highways, there was 3D models produced for the highways and the structures. And then it was all brought into, it wasn't Navisworks, it was, I think it was 3D Max, they called the software, which then allowed them then to put in the landscape and proposals, and even this house that you're seeing on that picture at the time, that was just a planning application. It was a plan drawn that the creative design team were able to recreate and replicate within the model. So yeah, 3D models for all the design then just brought into one program to add the additional graphics to it.
The video there, just been chatting before the presentation there, just sort of shudders a bit there whenever you're playing it across the web, but it's a much smoother video there. So the links are on the DFI. They have a dedicated section on their website for this scheme there, so you can find the links to the video if you want to watch. Anybody wants to watch it again, there just on their own machine there, they might get a smoother, more accurate picture of what it really was or really is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
And just around phasing and timing then, probably Andrew, I think this is probably more for, can you tell us a bit about what stage the project is currently at, to understand the vesting orders are live now, and when is sort of construction commencement anticipated?
Yeah, so the vesting direction and bridge orders were published earlier this summer, and all the vesting order went through in August. All orders went through in August. And so the land is now vested, and DFI are actively doing the advanced works, the enabling works. So that includes securing the site, the temporary fencing, any site clearance works that needs to be done, and then probably most notably the diversionary work for NIE and the 33 kV overhead cables. So that's likely to take place within the first half of next year. Funding is secured for the advanced works. We're still waiting on the funding then for the main works, but it's anticipated that construction would commence within the next 2 to 3 years. All being well.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe a question for Mick. Given that the overhead power lines are to be redirected to underground to traverse the river, has there been any consideration of the potential impacts from electromagnetic fields created upon fish migration and behaviours?
Not within the work that we done there, but I believe that NIE, whenever they take over, they have their own environmental consultants looking at the work that they will be doing as part of any diversionary work. So we haven't considered that at the minute.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. A question just in relation to the cyclists. The cyclists coming through the bypass towards the Belfast Road and then wishing to head southeast, how are they catered for within the scheme?
There's crossing facilities at the A4 Dublin Road roundabout. So there's an existing combined footway cycleway on the eastern boundary of the A4, and we've got crossing facilities at the roundabout to link into that.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Okay, another question about the bridge, which we've maybe covered before, but maybe there's more information on it. But what are the key engineering and environmental factors which led to the 3-span rather than single-span Earn Bridge?
Yeah, kind of what I mentioned before was really just the constraints below deck and above deck. So really we had to keep the bridge deck as slender as possible so that there was sufficient clearance because it's a navigable channel. So when we were working with Waterways Ireland, they had given us a level, the sort of minimum level for the soffit of the bridge deck. And then we also then had, at the time when we had the 33 kV overhead cables going diagonally across the bridge, we had to ensure there was sufficient clearance underneath the electricity lines. And that also then had to consider the maximum sag of those lines at the time. So it was heavily constrained, and that's why having a slender bridge deck was what we were aiming for and what we were targeting. Now that DFI has taken the decision to divert the cables, we don't have that constraint above the bridge deck. So that's why a single span option is now being considered,
Okay.
or is a potential option.
Okay, just one final question then, Andrew. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about the land vesting and the land boundaries and whether that has had any impact on design or route selection for the scheme?
In terms of the vesting of the land, so we wanted to minimize the disruption because these are active farms along the route and businesses. So we did want to minimize the impact on their land, and the preferred route that was undertaken by AECOM had considered a number of different factors really. But so what we have presented here at the minute kind of strikes a good balance in the disruption caused to landowners while also then providing sufficient features for all transport modes. So yeah, it probably was a key consideration in it that there wasn't too much land or any more land vested than what was needed to deliver the objectives of the scheme.
Okay, that's terrific. Andrew, that's all our questions answered, folks. So we'll move on to the next stage, which is starting to bring our event towards a close. So I'd appreciate if you could bear with me for a few minutes to thank those who've enabled this event to happen today. So first and foremost, on behalf of SIWEM and Engineers Ireland, we're very grateful to Andrew and Michael from Atkins for their terrific presentation on this subject, the Enniskillen A4 Southern Bypass. I thought it was really excellent to hear in detail about the project and the unique technical and environmental aspects of it. And obviously, it's in such a sensitive area close to the Erne. As a reasonably regular visitor to Enniskillen myself, I could see the obvious benefits of the scheme for everyone, really, residents, businesses, and commuters. And I was very pleased to see that active travel has been catered for so well, and no doubt that will be a well-used feature. I was also very reassured to hear that pedestrian safety at the Jones Memorial Primary and also the construction stage safety in proximity to the overhead power lines were given really proper and appropriate consideration in the design and planning. So thank you for a really excellent talk, Michael and Andrew. As you know, these events don't happen by themselves and take a little bit of time and effort to make happen. So I'd really like to thank our peers in SIWEM for taking the lead role in organising today's event, particularly Robert, Louise and Barbara, who managed all the technical and logistic Zoom matters behind the scenes. And thank all of you, our audience, who have joined us today. Thanks for your attention to the topic and for your very thoughtful contributions to the questions and answers. So look forward to having many of you back at further Engineers Ireland and SIWEM events this year, and who knows, some of those might even be in person. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Robert to close.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Jared has said. Thanks for everybody for attending, taking the time. Thanks to Andrew and Michael for pulling together a really, really interesting presentation. And thanks for Jared and Engineers Ireland for coming together with SIWEM again and putting on a really good webinar. And hopefully maybe next year, as Jared says, we'll maybe get back to some live events. So thanks to everybody, and I'll let you all get off to enjoy your lunch.
Thanks very much, folks.